Hi, welcome to another episode. Please like, share, and subscribe to join the growing family. Now let's delve in. In his dire warning, Eirik Kristoffersen said NATO countries have 2, maybe 3 years to get ready for an assault by Vladimir Putin's forces. Last week, the NATO defense chiefs met in Brussels, where several emphasized the importance of countries in Europe increasing their readiness for an attack. This came as secret plans were leaked revealing that Germany is preparing for Putin's forces to attack NATO as early as 2025, and after a senior NATO general said the alliance was preparing for such a scenario to happen within 20 years. Kristoffersen pointed out that Moscow has built up its military stockpiles far quicker than expected. With his invasion in Ukraine at a stalemate, Putin has also switched his economy onto a war footing, meaning weapons factories are producing arms around the clock. What's more, Putin's allies in Iran and North Korea are also propping his forces up with arms, meaning Russia can build up its defenses faster than previously thought. Analysts believe the despot intends to outlast Ukraine, which is relying heavily on support from its allies, particularly the US, before setting his sights beyond Ukraine's western borders, with the Baltic states in particular under threat. But Norway also shares a border with Russia at Europe's most northern point, and is thus vital to the continent's defense strategy against Putin's forces. Russia has increased production significantly, Kristoffersen told NTB. They have also collaborated with countries such as Iran and North Korea, which means that we can get a faster buildup of the Russian defense than what we envisioned just last year, he added. So we must use the time well now to strengthen our own defense. Relative peace in Europe was shattered in February 2022 with Putin's invasion of Ukraine and kicked European nations into action. Germany, for example, dramatically ramped up its defense spending, while Finland swiftly joined NATO. Sweden is set to follow once its application is approved. However, Kristoffersen warns that much of Europe's military supply is being sunk into Ukraine to support Kiev's forces in their fight against the invading Russians. He points out that the same can be said of Russia, which has sunk vast supplies of military hardware as well as soldiers into its war, with limited success. With Russia having found ways to quickly replenish and expand its supply of weapons, Kristoffersen says it is vital for NATO to continue to support Ukraine, currently Europe's the first line of defense, for as long as it takes. This is a calculated risk, he says. If the danger was imminent of an attack by Norway right now, then we could not have given so many weapons. But that is not the case. Norway's defense chief also addressed mounting concerns in Europe that a potential election victory for Donald Trump in this year's U.S. presidential elections could be damaging to Ukraine, the NATO alliance, and Europe's defenses. Kristoffersen played down the concerns, saying, "What Trump criticized was primarily that the various European countries do not spend enough on defense. But the situation is completely different now in 2024 than it was in 2016 or 2020. He added, "It is absolutely in the USA's interest to have a strong NATO in the world we live in now. I think Trump understands that." Meanwhile, NATO said on Tuesday it does not see any imminent military threat from Russia towards any member of the alliance, but was keeping up its deterrence with the largest exercise in decades set to kick off later this week. "We do all of this to ensure that we have the forces in place to remove any room for miscalculation or misunderstanding in Moscow about our readiness to protect every inch of NATO territory. And as long as we do that, there will be no attack against the NATO territory," NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg told reporters in Brussels. NATO this week will launch its Steadfast Defender 2024 exercise, its largest since the Cold War, involving some 90,000 troops, which will rehearse how U.S. troops would reinforce European allies in countries bordering Russia, and on the alliance's eastern flank if a conflict were to flare up with a near-peer adversary. Contracts for a new facility at RAF Lakenheath, Suffolk, detail U.S. plans to place nuclear weapons 3 times the strength of the Hiroshima bomb at the base, The Telegraph reports. There have been no U.S. nuclear weapons in the UK since 2008, when it was decided threats from the Cold War era had been reduced. It comes as several NATO members face warnings about bolstering their militaries in the event of an armed conflict, most likely with Russia. The government has defended the British military and its position as the second largest spender in NATO. Number 10 was also forced to confirm it would not be introducing conscription in the event of war breaking out. There are also concerns about the potential return of Donald Trump to the White House after this year's election. The former U.S. president has slammed EU countries for relying too heavily on America when it comes to military spending. He previously said he would not come to Europe's defense if it was attacked, despite NATO's commitment to act as one if one member state is attacked. A source told Bild that an escalation between Moscow and the West could start as early as February. Month by month, the secret report maps out how the conflict would kick off. It is said that Putin would order another wave of mobilization, enlarging his army with an additional 200,000 people in the coming months. By June, the Kremlin would have launched a spring offensive in Ukraine, pushing the Ukrainian army back. Russia's at first covert, and then increasingly overt attack on the West would begin in July. According to the scenario, this situation could escalate in October if the Russian president deploys troops and medium-range missiles to Kaliningrad, an enclave sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania along the Baltic coast. From December, an artificially induced border conflict and deadly clashes would engulf in the vicinity of the Suwalki Corridor, a barely 100-kilometer-long stretch of land between Russia's allied Belarus and Kaliningrad. Even a small attack on the area could cause huge problems for the West. Taking advantage of a moment of weakness when the U.S. may be without a leader for several weeks after the elections, Russia, with the support of Belarus, would repeat the 2014 invasion of Ukraine, but on NATO territory. By the summer of 2025, the report claimed that hundreds of thousands of NATO soldiers could be deployed. Russian Foreign Affairs spokesperson Maria Zakharova dismissed the predictions as the kind you would find in a horoscope. Thanks for watching and see you again in another episode of World Formatics.